There's definitely some key players in this. Jackie Mata. I mean, she crushed some furniture budgets for us, kept digging after we asked, kept us coordinated, asked a ton of good questions, ran with things when we asked her to. Absolute all-star. Dylan Turner. He's been along the ride since we were in the back corner of Texo, so this is his baby just as much as it's mine, and he ran with a ton of stuff. Jeff Kramer crushed several scope items and just was willing to jump in wherever it was needed. And then Roger, man, shop manager. I mean, he had a major undertaking and a big piece of pride for him to get all that done and moved into the new shop and operational. And I'm super proud of him. So, I mean, a ton of people help, but those are some key people that come to mind.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mom Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. We made it, Stewie.
The podcast is not what you're talking about, though.
We're still we're clawing and scratching.
Yeah,
when it comes to the podcast journey.
Scrambling. Yeah. No,
like that crab from last week that's trying to get out of the bucket from you, Brad.
That's the podcast. Is us just
pulling me down.
No, I think what you're referring to is the months and months and months and months of clawing and scrambling for your April 1 roll into your new space, yeah?
Yeah. April Fool's Day as a construction end date, as a sublease date, as a lease termination date, and as a move-in date, all on the same day. I'm just a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
You know what I'm thinking about out loud as we're talking about this? That now we are moved in now. So, spoiler alert, I am doing this from our new office space. But I thought my capacity would free up like it had to have, right?
Oh, no, You got the backlog now. All the stuff that was simmering is back to the front.
Just octopus hands just moving all these different schedule appointments right now. Actually, right before our recording started.
Yeah.
Just like moving like 17 meetings. It did not go away.
You're still going to be busy. You can still get back to the business of managing your calendar and all the to-dos and all the regular stuff now that you've checked the one gigantic thing off your list. But I was thinking for today, we talked about this offline, it's going to sound fake, but I was thinking about today we would maybe dive into like the process and the lessons learned, because you go before a lot of people who are listening who are maybe looking at updating their space, moving, fixing something, managing through logistical challenges, et cetera. And so when we were talking, kind of prepping for today, I thought, man, there's got to be some great lessons learned in there for listeners in terms of moving or preparing to move or remodeling or just managing people, or I don't know exactly what they are yet. We don't have a list. But that's what I wanted to talk about is the process, man, because I know that you figured something out that somewhere down the road is one of our listeners goes through the same process or something similar. They think, man, okay, that was very helpful. So that's where I want to land. I'll kick it to you to just say like big picture stuff. Like if you had do you have a list, or have you just taken mental notes on it, or where are we headed, do you think?
Oh, man. All sorts of different stuff since it's fresh. And I don't know if this is my 4th or my 5th office move, but I've done a few of these. And,
I didn't know that.
That's by no means being an expert at this. It's just you've accumulated some experience and some wisdom. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you now, like, this is the first time we had to go find somebody to sublease our previous space and then try to negotiate a lease termination so we didn't actually have to sublease it, and try to have the mission of no double rent to pay, for both facilities, and manage that and see what it looks like. And you're going to learn a lot. The biggest thing, just to start off with, is no matter how many times you've done it, like, it takes a village. We moved, past tense now, from a 55,000 square foot facility to 115,000. And you're talking about 12 to 15,000 square foot of office space, 100,000 square feet of manufacturing. There's a ton of logistics, ton of construction, ton of everything, right? Furniture, you name it, people. You are going to drop so many balls if you try to take it on yourself. You have most likely a team that not only is willing to help, but wants to help. They want to be a part of that journey.
Ian and I have that conversation on a variety of other things. We've moved offices, but other things where he's like, no, I'm like, hey, I don't want to burden you with that. And he's like, no, burden me with that. I want to be part of the process. Like, help me solve, help me, resolve, et cetera. So that's a good point, is people are yearning for involvement to be a part of the process, no matter what that process is. This instance being moving. People want to be involved.
Yep. Different people with different personalities, right? And different areas in the business, because they're looking at things differently. Like you might be so stuck on like, all right, construction and schedule, and you might lose something massive. Like here, I'll put dirt on my face right now. Like I lost complete sight over data. Like I was trying to figure out where the lighting goes and all this sort of stuff. And then somebody just asked a question that was part of like this informal committee. Like, have we signed up a data contractor? I'm like, nope. Didn't even think about it.
Oh, you're talking about internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew there was outlets being ran, but that's a whole different thing from signing up a data contractor to pull all the Cat 6 cable all throughout the space to the IT closet. Like we were pretty far down the road when I didn't even have somebody signed up yet. And then somebody asked that question, and then not only did they ask the question, but they said, I'll champion it. Like, got it. I'm going to grab it.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to put us into little tiny phase boxes, and then we can talk in those like phased boxes about pros and cons and all of it. So I think the boxes that we set up here are getting out of your old space, like what that looked like, and not, you don't need to get too far into the specifics or weeds or details, but just let's talk through that. And then the process of preparing the new space, right? We're talking about infrastructure, data, obviously, space planning, all that sort of stuff. And then I want to talk about the physical logistics of moving from one space to the other, because I suspect that there were boxes and wheelie carts and all sorts. Like that process has its own lesson learned. So maybe we talk through. Maybe we do warehouse as a sub part of it, because that's a whole different animal that you're tackling. That I've had a couple of chances to look out there in the warehouse, and it is a vast and humongous space that needs to be very, very, very detailed, planned for purposes of keeping your production rolling and stuff. So we'll put that as the fourth bucket. So if that's cool with you, let's talk through it like that. Like, let's talk about the idea to leave the old space, and then what it looked like in terms of actually being finished with your obligations there to make sure that you were cleared for not doing double dip rent and stuff like that.
Yeah, you get to this point where you sell a few monumental projects, right? And then you have that as like a first light switch that goes off, and then you start having a little bit more. You can't just be reactive off that, right? Because then if you make a big time decision off a long-term lease or a purchase of a large space, like, can you sustain that level of backlog, or is this just like a short flash in the pan, and then it's going to be dried up, and then you're going to have double the amount of burden without the offset of revenue and capacity. Right. So once that light switch goes off, you're like, I need to start thinking about this. That's when you start pulling in your upper level people, maybe your investors, and you start having bigger conversations like, hey, I'm going to run out of space proactively. By this time, I will be fresh out of space here. So we're going to need more. What does that look like? And then you start going through all the solutions. Do we move? Do we rent or buy a lay down yard? Because a lot of the material storage becomes a bottleneck for you, and you don't want to take up under the roof space just to store materials that should be on a job site anyway. Yeah. We have offices in 4 different cities, so the discussion around, can this service all 4 cities? Can this service our Denver operation that's our recent acquisition to the company? How can this help the company, not just Dallas? And then so that it started manifesting into larger conversations, larger strategies that led us to ultimately make this decision. Yep, it's time to move.
Gotcha. The couple questions. The one is, like, what did running out of space look like? I mean, was that like people on people? Was that back-to-back in offices? Was that loss of productivity or production in the warehouse because you didn't have enough capacity? Like, how did you know, like, what were the trigger to say, well, we're running out of space?
Yeah, good question. So we, in our last facility, I'm still trying to get that past tense, future tense knocked down. Yeah. And then squirrel moment, I cannot figure out how to get back from a meeting to this new office. Like, I'll start robotically driving to the old office, and I'm like, I shouldn't be on 114 West. I should be on East. Total squirrel moment.
It'll take 2 or 3 weeks, right, to reprogram your internal GPS on how to get home.
So I knew if things would go really well that we would eventually outgrow our first space. So in 5 years later, we did. Mm-hmm. And And that's kind of, I don't want to say ideal, but I left some room for growth within that first facility. But people were starting to get doubled up. We had to shut down a conference room and turn it into office space. People were moving around, and that's not even the activator. It was actually just future. Like starting in another month or so, the space that you recently toured, our new space, is going to be slamming. So it's just getting ready for the future. And then that puts the pressure on, like, how do you sustain that from all those high-level strategies? But it's kind of like a future bottleneck. Like, okay, we can sustain this now, but come June, some sort of decision is going to have to be made, or quality is going to go down. People are going to be less excited and happy, and that the culture is going to be brought down because everybody's so strained. Like, there's all these different decisions, and so it's like, okay, now let's plan for the future. So when you walk around this office now, there's a lot of empty space. Not so much in the shop. It's already filling up really fast, but from an office standpoint, we have some room to grow, because when you do all this planning and spend all this money and it kind of derails you from your day job for several months, or just adds a second job or third job, whatever you want to call it. You want to try to get it as right as you can, and you want to leave some room for growth within reason. Obviously, you don't want to go overboard and blow a budget that doesn't make sense for your overhead structure, but leaving some room to growth is huge.
Yeah, you also don't want to end up in that scenario where the road construction is completed and there's immediately log jams again. Where you that stretch of road, right? Air quotes, that stretch of road. We're like, oh, it's going to be awesome now because they got new off ramps and they're all already jammed up.
Yeah.
You need to avoid
I've seen
that.
it.
Yeah. So that's good. Now, you do have some good space to grow, but it's not too much. It's not like you have 5 times more offices than you need. It's enough to future cast for the next 7 years or so. I don't know exactly what the growth plan looks like, but you got plenty of room to grow, but not too much that it's like awkward and weird.
Well, and also instead of building new based on what was out in the market and our schedule, we ended up taking existing from a tenant that moved out. So we were working under a box of existing MEP, right? Like your overall square walls, and then we reconfigured that office space to make it work for us within those office walls. But that box of overall office square footage was much larger than we would have done by a few thousand square feet. But why not? It actually costs more money to rip it down and make less. So since we can make the manufacturing piece work and the office work, why not leave it as is? And it'll be a bigger office space, but allows us to grow. And manufacturing-wise, what we have out there now, we shouldn't outgrow it. The only thing you should need down the road potentially is that off-site storage that I was talking about. So this should be plenty from a manufacturing to pump out goods and get it created and done, and we might just need to go elsewhere to store if projects aren't ready to receive the material.
Interesting. That's a long future play then, to make sure you have space, or to have thought through what forever, sort of air quotes, forever space looks like then.
Well, I'm thankful for a lot of people above, below, in between that ask different questions like that. Like there's expectations too, right? If you have an investment company, like, to use the waterline principle, like, what's your new waterline? Like, revenue expectation last year versus this year is going to be drastically different. And it puts pressure on sales and estimating to, like, hey, here's this benchmark. We have a new benchmark. How are we going to get there proactively? We need to focus on the strategy behind it before we just start bidding a bunch of work. Because that waterline has rised basically 2x, right? Like double the square footage, double the manufacturing. We're good in 2022, but what does 2023 and beyond look like?
Right. What was the conversation around, well, let me take 2 steps backwards. The firm also has multiple offices, and we have consolidated like centers of IT and accounting, and they're all different spaces where they land. And so I'm thinking through that, the way the firm operates in terms of like centralizing some of those business functions, in terms of how you guys thought through whether or not your space in its new incarnation would be able to service any of the other core business functions or any of those other things that were needed in some of the other offices. How did that conversation go? I mean, not trying to get like too deep into the weeds of your business, but like how'd those conversations go? Like how'd it work out?
It's almost an expectation, especially with Denver. We're tied in really, really well with our Denver operation right now, and they know we're an extension of them. So they can go out and be bold, and we got their back from professional manufacturing. Like They could go chase some things that would make them uncomfortable and uneasy. And the only thing you have to change really is your trucking expense. So yes, those conversations are all being had.
So the thought is that theoretically, one of your other offices sells some Gigantosaurus glass box. You guys can produce out of that facility and then truck to the site with not even a blip in the production schedule. Within
reason, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was thinking more like core business, like bringing marketing or accounting or something like that, because that's where my mind went. But I hadn't thought about production servicing other locations and offices and stuff like that. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. This opens the door, though, for ideas and opportunities like an internship program here. We don't have a formal internship program, but we're about to. Also, a talent acquisition plan. If we were to hire a talent acquisition specialist local to here, there's space for them. There's space for new hires. There's space for interns. It just boosts up the opportunity we have from an office standpoint as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so walk me through the process then of like disengaging from the, I guess probably landlord at the old place. I mean, everybody knows that when you have office space, you've signed a long-term commercial lease, and I don't know how long the one you had was. Again, not trying to get too far into the special sauce of what you guys were doing, but no surprise you had a long-term lease. Were y'all close to the end? What'd you have to do to exit that?
Yeah, that's a good question for people that hopefully this is a nugget for somebody, but you know, that tenant rep or that developer or owner's rep, they're not going to let you out of that thing. No. I was 5 years into a 7-year lease, and we own that. But make sure you check your contract language and sublease is available. And so in our contract language, you can sublease and you split the profits of any rent increase. So from 5 years ago to today, the rent rate is way higher. So what we ended up doing is basically going on the approach of sublease, putting it out in the market, showing it, getting a ton of interest, narrowing it down to the finalist, and then taking this to that building owner on a silver platter and say, hey, instead of us splitting this, you can have the whole thing. Just instead of this being a sublease, terminate us.
Right.
And even then it got a little dicey, but they ended up taking it because they're able to put more profit and long-term projection into their vacancies. And we ended up doing a lease termination that got signed like a week ago. So like this takes you to the finish line. It's high pressure to get this deal done. I didn't want overlap of rent, which meant we had to go for some temporary occupancies in our new shop, but not the office. So the shop needed to be operational before the office space in our new facility, which that was a challenge with the city of Capel.
What was the chatter? Okay, so I would have thought that old landlord, when you bring to them your subtenant or the subtenant on a silver platter, and then proffered the idea that why don't you just take this, lock them in as a new tenant, let us out of our lease, you can re-sign them for 7 or 10 more years, and you can take all the profits. That seems like a very attractive way to approach that scenario. What was the conversation around why that potentially the landlord was not interested in that? Because that seems like a great deal for them.
Maybe just hedging bets. I think they're hedging bets by taking this. They wait 2 more years. Who knows how much higher the market is, and they can refresh at a new 7-year rate because they already got me locked in. It's an easy button. I got to figure it out. And if I do find somebody for a higher rent, they make profits for doing nothing. Yeah. So at the end of the day, they've probably ran some financial models and like it makes way more sense for us to take this whole thing and redo the deal because who knows when this going to plateau, but we are on a steep rise. Like, for example, this was an 8-month-ish process, but from the time that we signed this lease on this new facility to now, I think rent's 50 cents more per square foot, which is a ton of money.
Yeah, that's a big number when you multiply times your foot.
Big number.
How valuable? I don't know if that's the right word. Actually, let me ask a different question. Who are the players in those exit conversations in terms of getting out of your old lease? Like, was your broker involved there, or was that just landlord-tenant conversations? Who were the players in that conversation?
It's very similar to selling a house. You have your broker and they have their broker, and they're having conversations and feeding that information back to us.
So that was the same way. I mean, I anticipated that was the entry strategy, getting into a new place, but that was the same sort of process in terms of the exit strategy from the old place. Everybody's brokers were involved heavily, and Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
and David Esky was mine, which
Shout out former guest, yeah,
with Cushman Wakefield, who skips rungs of the ladder over there with how high he's climbing. But man, he's a humble dude, serves his clients well, cares, right, and follows up and does a really good job. So he's one of those dudes that 5+ years ago when we found our Grand Prairie space, he was the guy, and I didn't know him then, but now I know him, so that trust level is a lot higher, and I knew he had our best interest at heart, and he did some really good things for us on the back end that was unsolicited. And I don't want to call him out on what he did, but he did some great things for us that really helped us. Because in order to negotiate, which I think we should go into cost for sure a little bit, the negotiation's getting tougher and tougher where you don't get good allowances in that anymore. And he was willing to sacrifice some of his fee in order to help in the negotiation because we had to sign a longer than wished for lease term.
Gotcha. So all of the parts were on the table to figure out how to make it put it all together.
And he was part of that unsolicited. So
that's interesting. Well, shout out to David, man. He's an awesome dude. He's helped me on some other stuff on the side, just like not related to space, but I had a couple questions about some stuff, and he's just like very freely giving of his time and all my nonsense questions to help. So shout out to Dave. Okay, so what is the cost question then? You said we should go into that. Is this the right spot? I don't know what the issue is, so I don't know where to put it in.
Well, there's a lot at play, right? Like, so if you have a solid plan for the sublease of your existing space, or maybe you don't have that problem because you're in startup mode and you're only getting your first facility, but what is your budget?
Yeah.
What is your budget, not just for the building, or like if you're buying land and constructing a new building, or if you're doing what I did and took an existing building and refinished it, set your budget and set your expectations. Find out from these properties what the TI allowance is. So whether it's new or existing, they're going to give you an allowance rate. And that rate's only going down because it's way more competitive. They don't have to offer as much. And that allowance that they give you is bare bones. Like you're going to get lights, you're going to get air and heat, maybe in the offices like that they're supposed to be. Maybe they're balanced. Some new carpet, some new wall paint, period. Ooh. So if you're looking for any sort of upgrade, like obviously our office space, you have all the storefront, glazing, film, like that all had to be supplied by us, which kind of reduces their scope a little bit. But there's a ton of upgrades in here, and we still didn't even go top shelf,
Yeah.
So whatever you think your budget is, up it.
It's more.
There's going to be the data thing that pops up. There's going to be all these unforeseen items, change orders that come up. If you're not familiar with construction projects, change orders are, I don't know, we probably accounted for 5-ish% of the construction cost in change orders that just got added, which a lot, like the biggest one, to shift a hallway 3 feet, you would think is a small deal, but then you have to move the sprinklers and the mechanical systems and all sorts of stuff that had a ripple effect, but it was worth every penny. Or we would have had ridiculously large offices on one side of the hallway and then smaller office on the other, and it helped level those out a little bit. But yeah, set a budget, set some expectations, not just for what you can afford on your rent rate or your cost for your mortgage, so to say, but also to build it out because it's freaking expensive.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you think with us being in the construction industry, the insight into that would be easy and figure out how to like save money and do it, but it is what it is. And I tell you, I think it was your comment, like the folks who specialize in this arena of construction, man, those guys are ninjas. They were in and dominating your space and flipping it like crazy fast. Those guys are ninjas.
Yeah, they finished a day early, so we were in the 31st, March 31st.
There you go.
They just didn't want to mess around with me on April Fool's Day.
Mess around with the joke master and get punked. That was their word. They were worried you'd scare them up.
That bald guy looks shifty.
Did I send you the video of Ashley and Stella catching William on April Fool's?
With the super glued cereal or something?
It was, yeah. Well, I'll have to post it, but it wasn't super glued. They put a bowl of cereal with a spoon in the freezer. It was frozen.
Oh, okay.
And then they made the cereal, put like a little new cereal and a little fresh milk on top, so you couldn't. And then he was not happy about that.
You know that face he made, the not happy face?
Yeah.
He gave me the same one when I screamed in the karaoke machine when he entered the door.
Like, just go away, bro. Like, enough.
Yeah, relax, yeah. Loudmouth.
that morning we got off. Here's your Insta-dish moment. 22 minutes in, which might be a world record. That morning when he gave the enough of this face, he won the whole day because he just got up from the table, pushed the bowl away out of frustration, got up from the table, walked away, and we just got right back in bed and went to sleep again. Yeah, there you go.
Not ready for this nonsense yet.
He ain't got time for that. Okay, so we were talking about construction cost. Any surprises or tips through the build-out process? I mean, we're in the industry. You see this stuff getting built all the time, but now that you're the owner, so to speak, the tenant there, what are your, man, we didn't think about that, or here's a hot tip if you're building out new space, or don't forget this, or something like that?
Again, to the top, as part of this, and then the other part you're going to appreciate as an attorney, bring a lot of people. Bring a lot of people that see it from different angles, not just in the plans, because the plans are one thing, but then when you actually walk it during construction, see what is there and see what isn't there. Pay close attention to what you paid for. You paid a lot of money, and there might be things that people lose sight of. All of our ceiling tile is missing the R19 insulation above it. And if you're not looking for things like that, that's going to cause some thermal and some sound issues. But walk it, and just like your construction contracts, it's not just what's written, but what isn't written.
Right.
What should be included as a standard that you need to discuss. And obviously, it's way better to catch it before it's signed, because after it's signed, you have a lot taller task to get it approved.
Yeah. So when you would walk it, would you take your little task force over with you, so to speak, and just y'all walk it as a team?
Not really, because everybody's schedules have been so busy that it's
I see.
Whenever you can get there, get there. It doesn't even need to be a scheduled walk. Just go, see if you see anything. And shout outs to, Roger crushed it, Dylan crushed it, Jeff crushed it, Jackie crushed it. Without them, this would have been so much more difficult. And we're probably not sitting here.
Yeah, as a good, and as a human who is presently wrestling with all the micromanaging, right? It's a good tip. Is your team is bigger than you. Your ability to see, correct, execute, it's all better when it's more. It's all better when it's people and not just a person. So don't forget that, whether you're building out a space or walking it to see what you missed or trying to execute something on a job or whatever. Don't forget.
Yeah, and another hot tip, if this is for that one person that's actually moving around, internet. So even if the existing tenant had the same internet as you, do not assume that it's a plug and play. All the everything we just talked about, the lease, the sublease, the termination, the construction, all of it was about to be for naught, because my internet provider was telling me it's going to be 120-day construction, and the previous tenant had used it, which would have put us to June, and it would have really hurt us because we were already signed up to move out of our existing space, and people from the office were going to have to work from home. It would have caused a ton of chaos, and that took a dogfight in the last month just to get them on site to do basically 2 hours of work. So assumption kills and everything, right?
Yeah.
Do not assume that just because the previous tenant had the same internet service that it's plug and play. It might be outdated boxes, fiber, coax, who knows? There's a million things that could go wrong.
Seems like even at home, every time you tweak or touch your internet, they need to run a new wire from the pole or whatever the case may be. So I get it, but also, man, that would have been tragic for everybody to have been stuck working remotely from all sorts of Starbuckses and trying to Teams catch up and all that sort of nonsense. All right, so let's talk about the next little bucket of stuff there, that being the actual process of moving. The logistics, perhaps, other than hire a mover. Any tips on how you got your stuff from there to here that would be helpful for someone trying to do something like that?
Man, honestly, that was one of the easiest parts.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
You just had a few people walk through it, and you just have to coordinate and communicate with your team to mark up their bins and mark up their desks. Some of their desks weren't going into their new office because the orientation of their desk didn't fit. You had to think about little things like that. Just because they have a desk, it doesn't mean it'll necessarily fit.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. It's just knowing schedule-wise, long lead time on new furniture. Don't just accept the first price on one chair. You might find it for half the price from another that's a little more hungry to get the job. We found that firsthand.
Yeah.
And just keep searching. You find the first one, look for another one. And time and time again, our team found more cost-effective options and lead times that worked and pulled everything together that same week.
I've had a similar experience on furniture for our office in that there is a lot of margin in that, and if you can ask the right questions and ask around, if you can usually find it for way cheaper. So that's a good, like, if you're trying to furnish something, ask around, double click something else, price shop that, because it is a high margin item.
Yep.
So that's a good tip. What else? I mean, kind of brings us to the end. You're here. You're posted up in the new spot. I've seen it. Everybody's got their desks and all the tchotchkes on it. I think you're waiting on some equipment perhaps for the shop, which is just kind of log lead time stuff. I mean, any other? Let me kind of draw it to a conclusion then. What's your big takeaways? If someone's out there thinking about looking for new office space, in the process of doing it, managing it, constructing it, building it, moving their team, blah, blah, blah. I mean, any big high-level takeaways, like this is something you need to know, don't forget?
A few big nuggets, yes. The first thing is schedule.
Okay.
Just like a lot of things that we talked about, be proactive. Don't wait until you need it. Kind of try to see if you can forecast when you're going to need it. And the supply chain's messed up, and things take a long time, and our market's on fire right now, so it's super competitive. So if you think you need to start looking for space, engage somebody to help you out and go see some spots, see what you like, see what you don't like. The whole process is going to take some time.
Let me ask a scheduling question. When you say scheduling, did you just like think about it big picture, or did you guys actually put a pen to paper or use some sort of like actual construction project scheduling software or Gantt charts, or was it more just amorphous?
I had a few different versions of schedules, right? So like the move-in schedule and then manufacturing schedule, because shutting down manufacturing is a much bigger deal than the office, right?
Oh, right.
So like, what did the shutdown look like? We had to get people from Germany to work on our CNC machines and E085 saws, like having a schedule just for ELU. Like, this is what the decommission of existing looks like, the recommission of new and existing, the new spot, like maybe three different schedules cooking. So scheduling is super, super key.
And not just like wagging at some date circled on the calendar, like legit, this needs to happen then, so this can happen. You treat it like a project. Yeah,
and when you do that, it helps your manufacturers succeed too, because that case with E085, we were able to give them an E085 schedule and said, this is our expectation of you. Can you meet it? And they said, yes. Cool. And all of a sudden, they know that, look, we mean business when we can't shut down and be down. Like, what do you foresee happening on your scope? And can we plan for it? So scheduling's huge. Give yourself some grace. Like, it is guaranteed. I don't care if you do this 1,000 times. You're going to miss stuff. Mistakes are going to be made. You're going to wish when you moved in you would have done a few more things. Just give yourself some grace. You did it. You're in. You're moved in. Celebrate it and chip away at the improvements as you go. But give yourself some grace. And I'm looking in the mirror on this, right? Like, I don't do a good job of that, and I don't do a good job of this last thing. And be comfortable asking for help. Hey, I need help. I'm drowning. And I got a lot of help from my team. Without them, we're not here. Like I said earlier, we are not moved in. Be willing to ask for help. People want to help. This is Texas, man. People want to help you, whether they have skin in the game or not. That's how we're built here, culturally as a company, but also as a state and a community.
Anybody on your team, I might be putting you on the spot here, but anybody on your team, just superstars in the process that deserve like a, man, thanks, here's a big shout out, couldn't have done this without you? Or is it just everybody?
No, there's definitely some key players in this. Jackie Mata, I mean, she crushed some furniture budgets for us, kept digging after we asked, kept us coordinated, asked a ton of good questions, ran with things when we asked her to. All-star. Absolute all-star. Dylan Turner, he's been along the ride since we were in the back corner of Texo, so this is his baby just as much as it's mine, and he ran with a ton of stuff. Jeff Kramer definitely crushed several scope items and just was willing to jump in wherever it was needed. And then Roger, man, shop manager. I mean, he had a major undertaking and a big piece of pride for him to get all that done and moved into the new shop and operational, and I'm super proud of him. So, I mean, a ton of people help, but those are some key people that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna shrug it off and wave me off when I do it here, but dude, shout out to you. Yeah, right. Shout out to you, because like I remember y'all posted up in the back of the Texo office, and a lot of people do, and it's a huge growth curve and a huge accomplishment to have gotten from 2 little circular tables, I think, in the back of that what is now the safety office at Texo, I believe, to where you guys are. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment, man. So I hope you guys can take a beat and bask in like we did it. We got from there, we got from here to there, from there to here, and look at this. So kudos to you guys. And it reminds me of a story that I think I've told on here before. Is like, that's awesome to get from back of the Texo office to there. But dude, lots of great things in store, right? This ain't the end of the road. So
yeah, for sure. I was able to share that. I don't do a good job of this and reflecting on personal victory, but it was cool to share that with the entire team in our first in-person weekly strategy meeting since pre-COVID, because we shut it down for COVID, that weekly meeting we were having. By the time we were allowed to be back as a group, we had outgrown our conference room. So we kept it as Zoom for 2 years. So this past Monday, we had our first one in person, and I was able to explain that story of just a piece of tape with our logo in the back of a rented out room. And look where we're at today. Like, this is because of you guys. Like, be proud. Be proud of where we're at, So it was cool to share that little nugget with the team.
That's awesome. I'm glad you guys could celebrate that. I will plug Kev here. Like, if y'all are moving or any of that story from the day thinks, man, I could use some data input on that, man, reach out. I mean, I can't help here, but I know Kev can, and there are instances where I can help out. So if you guys need something from us, hit us up, man. We're super easy to find, and I know Kev would love to grab a cup of coffee or break bread and say, hey, here's how I solved that problem, and you need to call this guy or whatever the case may be. So reach out if you'll need some help.
Always.
Yep. All right. That wraps it up for today. Until we see you guys next week, y'all stay out there. Keep moving mountains.